Welcome to the Back to the Bricks podcast, a new podcast about sports, faith, and culture. I'm Justin.
And I'm Nick, close friends turned mid-major rivals. Join us as we venture back to the bricks.
Welcome back to the Bricks. We are lucky to be joined by Matt Wilkes. He's a writer and creator for Reds Content Plus. I've known Matt for a long time when we used to play baseball back in his backyard. So a very long time I've known Matt, and lucky enough to have him on to talk about where we're at with the major leagues and where we're going to be at with our Red Legs. So, Matt, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of what you're doing and what your website is and stuff like that, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. So like Justin said, I'm a writer for Reds Content Plus. It's a site I started about a year or so ago, kind of to focus more on the analytic side of the game, but to kind of break that down and, make it accessible to the average fan who may see sabermetrics and be like, what the heck does that mean? And all the various stats that come along with that. So we haven't had a lot to write about lately, but that is the site I write for now. I've written for a couple other Red sites in the past, Blog Red Machine, Red Leg Nation. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. But now I'm over at Reds Content Plus, so come check us out.
Awesome. Cool stuff. I know I've read a couple of your guys' articles and stuff and have really enjoyed it. So we're going to talk about the DH and stuff later, and I read that article and really enjoyed it and shared it with some people. So that'll be cool. Go check them out if you have a chance. So we're coming off the heels of MLB kind of laying out a plan for what's coming and getting baseball back. So for those of us, as you said, the common fan who has no clue what this looks like, can you give us a summary of what's going on, what the plan's going to look like, and what baseball is going to be this summer?
Yeah, so it's looking like it's going to be a 60-game schedule, which you may have seen the players just rejected that. Basically, what happened is back in March, the players and owners came together on an agreement where the players would get full prorated pay based on the number of games played. So, if they played an 82-game schedule, then they'd get, half their regular salary. And then in turn, the owner or the commissioner could set the schedule. And so the negotiations the last month or so have kind of been about tweaking that March agreement more so than coming to a new agreement. So by rejecting the last proposal from the owners, the players just said, we want to proceed with the March agreement. You tell us how many games to play. And the owners kind of stuck with that 60-game schedule. And in doing so, the players retain the right to file a grievance against Major League Baseball, which is going to cause more issues in the future. But for right now, as long as the health and safety protocols are agreed to, it sounds like we'll have a 60-game schedule, I believe starting on July 24th is what they're looking at right now, ending September 27th, and then with your normal October postseason.
Cool deal. So sounds like we might get some baseball if everything goes off without a hitch, which for baseball right now is a extreme possibility. So with that being said, negotiations for the next CBA starts next year, and if we've seen anything during this time, it's that MLB office, front office people, owners, commissioner are totally on a different page than the Players Association. What can we expect next year when negotiating starts for the CBA?
I'm a little afraid to think about it. Based on what we just saw, I think it's going to be messy. First of all, there's just a lot of animosity between the players and the owners right now, and I'm sure that'll probably carry over. And there are a lot of issues still to be ironed out between them that they didn't even touch on this time. Obviously, money is still going to be on the table. MLB revenues have gone up and up and up over the last, I think, 17 years, reaching new records in recent years. And the players are going to want a bigger slice of that pie to, account for the bigger slice of the pie that the owners have gotten. So that's going to be a big fight. There's going to be a big fight over service time manipulation. And probably lots of other things. So, not to mention that the virus may still be an issue next year too. So once we get through the next baseball season after 2021, I think we're probably in for a big labor fight, and potentially a lockout or a strike, one of the two. I hope not, but it's not looking great just from what we've seen in the most recent negotiations this summer.
Yeah, it's sadly I think it's going to get ugly when all that starts. It's already been ugly. Baseball's already kind of made a joke of itself through all this, in my personal opinion. So it's not going to get any better anytime soon. Is a sad thing. So, with that being said, the real reason why you're on, the real reason why we're all here is to talk about our Red Legs, our beloved Cincinnati Reds. So, I know this is in your wheelhouse, and we love the Reds, and our listeners love the Reds. So, we'll just jump into that. I'll ask you some questions, and I'll let Nick jump in and ask you some Red stuff too. So, with it being a shortened season, and with the Reds having really a bunch of new faces and a bunch of guys that have never played together, and have never played in Cincinnati, what does this shortened season hurt or help the Reds in your opinion, Matt?
Yeah, it's hard to say because 60 games is such a short amount of time compared to what we're used to seeing. The Nationals last year, through 60 games, had a losing record, ended up winning World Series. So, the Reds could stumble out of the gates and doom their season, or they could go on a crazy run. You don't know with a season this short. On paper, though, uh, I think they have all the talent in the world to finally at least have a winning team again. They're in a tough division with the Cardinals and the Cubs. I wouldn't count the Brewers out either. Um, so so that'll make it tough to make playoffs, but they certainly have a team that is fully capable of it. You look at the improvements they made to the offense during the offseason. The pitching staff was already strong, and they added to it by bringing in Wade Miley, who's a pretty solid number 5 guy. You got to think Trevor Bauer is going to bounce back from his not great showing last year after the trade. He has all the talent in the world, and the Reds have what seems to be a great coaching staff in place. They've really embraced that analytical side of the game and the technology available to them to get the most out of their pitchers. So, I think that should still be the strength of the team. The bullpen may be the weak link among the three, but I think it should still be plenty strong. The pieces are there. Of course, there's always the variable of will any players opt out due to the virus. Eugenio Suarez, for example, his wife's pregnant right now, so that may prompt him to opt out. I don't know. So that could change the equation a little bit. But on paper, I think the shortened season, I don't think it will necessarily help or hurt the Reds. But I expect them to compete for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, they'll definitely have to get off to a better start than they have in the recent history. They haven't come out of the gates very strong in the past 5 or 6 years. They haven't been very good, but still, they've started extremely bad in those years. So I talked about you writing an article on this. I think it was in May, about mid-May or so. The DH, the universal DH, being able to be used because of this agreement the players and the owners and stuff have made. Does that help the Reds get? I mean, they have a lot of bats and a lot of things. I imagine I know your answer here, but does it help the Reds? And if it does, how exactly does it help the Reds this season and next, it sounds like?
Yeah, absolutely helps the Reds. Just getting a pitcher out of the lineup is going to help any team for the most part. They're usually not great hitters. You have your Trevor Michael Lorenzen, you have 10 Trevor Bowers who can't hit. So that alone will help. But beyond that, the Reds have a lot of depth. Before COVID really hit and canceled spring training, the big conversation was, what are we going to do with the outfield? We have too many outfielders and not enough spots for them. And the DH helps answer that question a lot. It's going to help David Bell really play matchups well and get all those guys into the lineup. I think you could very well see some sort of rotation of Jesse Winker, Nick Castellanos, Joey Votto in that DH spot. The first two, because they're not very good fielders, and Votto being 36 now, he'll probably need a few extra days off. So I think it can only help the Reds with the kind of depth they have. They're not just plugging in a so-so bench guy. They have legitimate guys coming off the bench they can plug into the DH or plug into the lineup and move, a Winker or Castellanos into the DH. Talking about guys like, Aristides Aquino, Philip Ervin, people like that who can come in and are legitimate threats in the lineup. So I think it's really only going to help them.
So, Matt, you've already talked a little bit about the pitching staff and the depth there with the starting rotation adding to it this offseason. Why shouldn't we expect the Reds to be the number one pitching staff in the NL this year?
I can't think of a good reason not to be honest with you. I think Luis Castillo obviously broke out last year. I still think there's more in the tank there, especially if he can develop that fourth pitch and a slider to help him get right-handed hitters out even better than he already does. And by all accounts, he was working on that pretty extensively during spring. The couple of starts we were able to watch from him, I noticed him throwing a lot of sliders. So it seems to be the next step in his evolution. So I think he can really step up into that ace role. He's still only, I think, 27 years old. So kind of right at that time where you would expect him to break out into his prime. Sonny Gray seems to be thriving under the new coaching staff and, utilizing all the different technology that the Reds have, and really going with that breaking ball heavy approach as opposed to a fastball heavy approach. And Trevor Bauer, obviously, we didn't see his best last year, but we're talking about a guy who finished second in the Cy Young voting a couple of years ago in the American League. So the talent is there, and you hope with the coaching staff in place that he can really get back to that level he was at a couple of years ago. And then behind him, you have Anthony DeSclafani and Wade Miley, really solid 4 and 5 guys. You saw Disco really dominate in the second half of last year after kind of struggling in the first half. I think he's made some adjustments to his mechanics that seem to have made a big difference for him. And then, Wade Miley last year, really until he blew up in September, was having a great season. So I think 1 through 5, their rotation can compete with just about anybody in baseball. And, if they do make the postseason, having that top 3 is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, I've been wondering, just as we talk about a reduced schedule here, do you think a team like the Reds, because they have a great staff, throwing-wise, pitching-wise, has a chance to ride that to the postseason easier than they would in a 162-game season? I mean, I think about guys having live arms, and even if you get to the postseason, I would think some guys have more juice left than they normally would. Do you think that'll be a factor this year?
Yeah, I think it absolutely could. With the caveat, of course, that have the players been keeping up with their training throughout this dead period, because I know it could definitely become an injury risk if players haven't. We're going to have a shortened, if you want to call it spring training 2.0 here in a couple weeks, but will that be enough time for them to build up their arms? So that may be a worry. I think you'll see teams use their bullpens a lot. I think they'll have. We've seen kind of the short hook become more prominent in baseball the last few years. I think we'll see that even more this year because teams are going to be worried about their starting pitchers, first of all, and second of all, they're going to have expanded rosters, bigger bullpens. But I think, assuming that these guys are healthy and stay healthy, they can absolutely ride that into the postseason and hopefully have, like you said, that extra juice instead of running on fumes like a lot of pitchers do once they do get to October.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I'm excited about, not even just MLB, is just the different format. I think it's going to be kind of fun to see these different professionals play in a way that they're not used to and have to play the reduced schedule and just have to do things differently. I think it might produce some really good baseball in this case. But as far as the Red Legs are concerned, when you think of holes, what do we need to look at this year as far as what has to improve for the Reds to be a postseason team?
Well, if you compare it to last year, obviously the offense has to get better, and then the pieces seem to be in place to do that. Looking at the roster just on paper, I think the biggest hole is probably a shortstop. If Freddie Galvis is a solid fielder, he kind of came into his own in terms of power in the last couple of years, but he's not really a high average guy. He doesn't get on base a whole lot. So offensively, I think he may be the weakness. Maybe at catcher too. Tucker Barnhart's more of a defense first catcher. Kirk Casale is kind of in the same boat. So those may be their two weaknesses in the lineup, but I guess one through seven, because they'll have the DH, is going to be really strong. And they'll have that depth in the bullpen as well. And the bullpen was kind of shaky at times last year. Um, more more with Raisel Iglesias, I think, is what sticks out in everybody's mind with the home run issues that he had. But I think the talent for him is still there, and they have a lot of talent around him if he does struggle again. I think Michael Lorenzen and Robert Stevenson are two guys to really watch out for in their second year under Derek Johnson and the pitching staff. They have great raw stuff, and now it's just kind of about taking that next step. And I think both of them very well could. So if we're looking at weaknesses, maybe the front end of the bullpen, in front of guys like Garrett, Stevenson, Lorenz, and Iglesias, may not be blowing guys away. But the number one weakness I would say is probably shortstop with Freddie Galvis. I think that's a position they probably would have looked to upgrade at the trade deadline. I have no idea what's going to happen with the trade deadline now. But yeah, he would, on paper, I think shortstop is their biggest weakness.
Yeah, just even thinking through some of the holes and some of the guys that were kind of all over the place last year. What do you think about Nick Senzel this year? Where do you think he fits into this roster? And do you think he's going to hit his way into it, or do you think he's going to hit his way out?
I expect him to hit his way in. He wasn't a top prospect for no reason. He didn't blow through the minor leagues very quickly for no reason. He would have been up with the Reds a lot sooner if he didn't have a couple of freak injuries. The kid can hit. I think he showed it last year up until he got hurt. He dealt with a shoulder injury that kind of hampered him the last month of the season or so. And you kind of saw the numbers take a nosedive after that. I know Turner Ward, their former hitting coach, kind of messed with his batting stance a little bit, and that seemed to have a negative effect too. But it sounds like he's gone back to his old stance. And as long as he's healthy, as long as that shoulder's healthy, he did have pretty major surgery on it last year, but he should be healthy now that he's had that extra time to recover. I expect him to really maybe not break out, but kind of show more than what he did last year, and take that next step toward a breakout. And the DH, I think, will really, really help Senzel, because I think he was kind of looking at maybe a part-time role, not necessarily bench role, but probably splitting time with Shogo Akiyama in center field, or Jesse Winker when they're facing left-handed pitchers. So the DH will kind of open up another spot for him to get in the lineup and keep developing, which I think is really important for a player of his caliber. You don't want to bury that kind of guy on the bench. So yeah, I expect big things from Nick Senzel.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'm completely off on this, but I think he's probably one of those guys that needs a confidence boosting year. Like, even if it's not a start every day and hit 300 kind of year, he just needs to be in a role where he can consistently have opportunities and feel like he's growing into it. Because, I mean, like you said, sky high expectations, did great in the minors. There's a reason that he's, being billed as this guy who can be an everyday all-star, But I think it's a lot to expect him to just pop right into the league and do that. But I think some fans, I think I was there last year. It was like, well, all we'd heard for the last few years was Nick Senzel. Why is this guy not hitting 350, right? Like, why is he not hitting the cover off the ball? But I think you're all over it. I think this year he just needs to find that role, and I think maybe even that DH spot might be perfect to help him even get more at bats, and just really get some confidence. And so I think that'll be really good to boost him forward this year as well as into the future, and hopefully become that all-star that we want him to be. So we've talked a lot about the Reds, Matt. What can we realistically expect if we have 60 games? What are we going to pin them down for? And maybe even more than just wins and losses, what should we look for?
I kind of talked about what to expect earlier with, how the shortened season will affect them. But I do think they'll be vastly improved. They'll be way more entertaining to watch than they have been the last few years. They kind of took a step forward last year, and I think they'll finally get back to some winning baseball this year. And hopefully be, a source of joy amidst all the horrible things going on in the world right now. So yeah, I think we're finally going to have something to get excited about with Reds baseball. for the first time in a while. As far as if you want me to make a wins-loss prediction, I can go for it. Again, they're in a tough division. They got the Cardinals, they got the Cubs. They'll play their fair share of games against the Twins and the Indians as well, and the White Sox should be better. So, you know, they do have plenty of teams to contend with in their schedule. So that makes me hesitant to say like 40 wins or anything like that. But I think, 35 wins is certainly within the realm of possibility. And I think winning the division is within the realm of possibility as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It just sounds so weird to hear you say 35 games, and it's like that's a winning record, and that's a playoff team, that's an NL Central Division winner. I don't know. It's just wild to think about. But I think it would be really, really interesting if they won 35 games, went to the playoffs, and then next year we're like back to like, well, we got to win 80 now or 85 to be in contention. I don't know. It's just kind of a funny thing to think about. Such a different perspective on baseball during this crazy season, as you mentioned.
Right.
Right. If you had to leave our listeners with any challenge, let's go Reds focused here. Like, what would you say as we get ourselves amped up for Major League Baseball, and maybe even I don't know. What I think you've kind of excited me, so I'm not going to say push stop a little bit, but what can you say to us to challenge us as Reds fans?
Just embrace the weirdness that this season's going to be. It's going to be a lot of different rules. It's going to be strange being a short season. It's going to be strange playing the AL Central, as much as we do. We won't play the NL East or the NL West. It's just going to be a weird season. The Reds, like I said earlier, they could make some crazy run to the World Series. Another team, maybe the Pirates come out of nowhere. In a season like this, it's hard to tell what's going to happen. So just embrace the weirdness of it. Going to see some weird stat lines, things like that. We can argue whether it's a legitimate season or not all we want, but we do have baseball, so just embrace it, enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think I think I saw you tweet yesterday about like Votto could go off, and hit go 60-game hitting streak, or like his on-base percentage could be absolutely insane and just this slice of a season. But I can for one say that if we have a good season, we will remember it in Cincinnati, and we will argue that it's a legitimate season. So
Absolutely.
we got your back when you make those claims here in the future. But thanks again for joining us, Matt, and make sure that you check out Reds Content Plus when you get a chance, and we will catch you back on the bricks next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Back to the Bricks podcast.
We'd love for you to leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, send this podcast to a friend, or share this episode on your Instagram story.
We'll see you back on the bricks next time.